Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain.
Well, after that, it's a beautiful Thursday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Kikilu.
Just one day before Friday, just to remind you.
Perspective.
Amaya Makinde, good morning and welcome.
Like nobody forgot.
Well, just in case.
I mean, that's one of the things you don't forget, really.
Well, it's also good to know that the National Assembly hasn't forgotten about the Auditor General's report.
Well, when you look at the date, I mean, it's not the 2020 Auditor General's report, really. It's the 2015 Auditor General's report. That alone is another topic for discussion because you imagine, so what happens to 2016, 2017, 18, 19, 20? That's huge.
I'm for one,
Yeah.
the fact that at least it's on the table for discussion.
And it's been for a while. Yeah.
Now,
They've been
when you
considering
put it like
for a
that,
while.
when you put water in this zeal. But, you know, really, I think it's clear what happens if you don't audit. What happens if you don't audit is quite clear. There is that bill before the National Assembly, it's being considered to make the Office of the Auditor General independent by creating an audit bill. Now, that audit bill, needless to say, we can imagine what's going to happen with it, how it's going to help to manage our very meager finances and all of that. But the angle that the National Assembly is looking at now, sincerely, I'm really waiting to see where it goes.
Especially because, I mean, the National Assembly says they will call out the MDAs that have failed to sort of defend their spenders. And I think it's quite important. So calling them out is one thing. Will there be repercussions beyond calling them out? I imagine the options are, there are a couple of options, really. I don't know if stopping their budgets is one of them. I mean, that might be far-fetched for some, but there needs to be some repercussions because we're talking about a government that is big on integrity, anti-corruption, and if we can't just sort that at the MDA's level, imagine when we talk about corruption, it starts from that level, actually. If there's no civil service, in quote, to help corrupt practices happen, then you probably never have some of this grand corruption. So if we can nip it in the bud, as it were, at that level, you imagine what the effect, the ripple effect would be on the general society. So for me, there needs to be repercussions. How far would the National Assembly go to ensure that these MDs actually come out and defend this?
What is the job of the National Assembly, first of all? Sorry, Chamberlain, before you put the cap on it. What's the job of the National Assembly? It is part of the responsibility of the National Assembly to monitor and oversight. Now, there is a Senate Committee on Public Accounts. That is the committee charged with the responsibility of monitoring the activities, that's from that Auditor General's report over the years. And you guys would remember we have hosted the chairman of the auditor of the Public Accounts, Senate Public Accounts Committee a number of times, and he continues to express their handicap in being able to do the appropriate thing. So the question I'm asking now is, following up on the repercussions that you're talking about, so what next? Are we helpless? Is it that we cannot even use our own rules? What exactly is the handicap? Maybe we should begin by looking at the standards we have now of monitoring what ministries, departments, and agencies do, and then know where to take it further.
It's not just about us, being helpless. Because, look, they're giving other corporate bodies, the establishments, the country, different groups, impressions here. Because, look, even listening to the reports, you think, wait a minute, is this actually happening? And then you look at those agencies of governments that they listed. And this is talking about the report of the year ended December 2015. And you think they've got ample time. They had several, amount of time to appear before this committee and just give accounts of what has happened. So, well, the suggestion, the impression that sends is that some people have got something to hide, or that there's a lot that has not been cleared, that needs to be cleared. And look, so what then happens if we look into all the other reports, or if the Auditor General decides to say, or if the Senate or House of Reps look at that for the last 10 years, what has been happening? Or even if you look at it up until maybe, say, last year.
Let's just look at 5 years. Have you seen that 1 year, Chamberlain?
And those agencies, you know, some of them are responsible for coming very hard on corporate establishments for their taxes.
Yeah.
And they wield a big stake if those firms don't. And then after remitting all of those, then these agencies don't account for public funds. Remember, nobody in government comes to run the government with their pocket money. It's public funds. So why is it so difficult for them to appear?
We need to police the police, as it were. But, I mean,
you don't have to have an independent body to even do that now.
Maybe we'll
to ensure that they should look out for this kind of things.
There's a forensic audit for the NDDC, pardon me. So if we can do that for the NDDC, then, I mean, we can do that for MDAs, maybe.
Guys, this is like bringing out the shotgun simply because you want to deal with one small rat. For God's sake, we have a system. What do we have a system for?
Oh, this is a big rat. This time this is a big rat right here.
This is a huge elephant right here.
In fact, take a look at the report. Let's tell you what we're talking about here.
For more than 4 months, the Senate Public Accounts Committee has been inviting heads of government agencies to respond to queries on financial infractions and mismanagement of funds detailed in the 2015 audit report prepared by the Auditor General of the Federation. The committee has concluded the first part of its engagement with the MDAs, and the chairman presents the report on its findings during Wednesday's plenary session.
Such attitude of interagency lack of cooperation constitutes a barrier to efficient...
In the report, queries on financial violations issued against 59 of the agencies by the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation were sustained, while those against 46 other agencies were vacated. Notable among the agencies whose queries were sustained include the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs, Joint Admission and Matriculation Board, Nigerian Army, and the Nigerian Ports Authority.
In the course of the consideration of the General's report, the committee observed and noted issues that warrant urgent parliamentary and executive attention. Consistent contravention of relevant constitutional provisions and all extant laws by the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. Prevalence of unwholesome financial practices by some principal revenue agencies which have negative implications on the revenue generation efforts of government.
However, 7 agencies listed in the report did not respond to a series of invitations sent to them to defend their queries.
This Senate will publish the names of these agencies for the public to know. This Senate will insist any public servant or civil servant that is given the public fund for public good and has questions to answer and refuse to appear to answer should have no business being in government.
A report of this magnitude, which details financial infractions by several government agencies, is not one the Senate intends to rush through, and lawmakers have been issued copies of the report to examine and make contributions on a later date. Meanwhile, the Senate is passing the 895.8 billion naira supplementary budget through second reading. The Committee on Appropriation will work on the budget and report back to the Senate. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Okay, so we're hoping that they'll look at all of that and perhaps, this is 2021. Well, nothing wrong looking at taking it up until 2020. As a matter of fact, you have to give accounts, don't you? Okay, take a look at the dailies now. Let's start with Vanguard newspaper here. They're talking banditry. Army kicks as Gumi alleges collusion by security agents. Says banditry is business. Security agents working with bandits. Insists only negotiation by governments, not use of force, can stop it. Asks governors to stop political amnesty, back it with actions, urges Buhari to invite IPOB for negotiations. Army dismisses Gumi's allegation, says troops not colluding with bandits. Well, it's a democracy. Opinions free. And but even though these days, look, is it a borderline between what now? What can be described as opinions and what can be described as, I don't know. But here you see army kicking. It means, who knows? Are they going to go beyond kicking?
I think this is not the first time they've kicked against this, but a statement like this, they've given response time and again. So what more, you might say?
Yeah, so there you go. Oh, yeah, a little bit of something about JAM there, even though JAM also popped up on that list of MDAs.
Queries.
Yeah, that have questions to answer before. Even the AFCC is on that list as well. Ministry of Finance is on that list
Ministry
as well.
of Information and Culture.
So look,
On that table that has been
yeah, you know, they don't have to give the impression that public servants are above certain things. It's not going to be good for democracy. So examples are being set, precedents, and many are watching to see what is being done. So you never know. But look at this. No hand in anti-media bills. Presidency says senior journalists, reps kick against moves to gag the press. Sponsor of draconian NBC bills, Odebumi, has no media background knowledge. AGF studying court's ruling on Twitter, presidency. So there you go. And so they do know, or is it established that they are anti-media bills, and then presidency explaining that no, we've got no hand in that one. But I guess the notice is out there for lots of people to just be on guard, know what to do, when to do it, because...
Is that a subtle denial or just you're not part of it?
Just washing their hands pretty much off that saying. But you know, the process of lawmaking also strikes me there. I mean, saying that the lawmaker who came up with that bill has no experience. And I recall we were speaking with the lawmaker recently, asking, okay, this bill that you presented, was it from your constituency? Was it a personal thing? Was it a party thing? You know, there are different routes to go about this thing. So it will be important to know why this was important and the process, the build-up to coming up with this bill.
Yeah, so everyone needs to engage, scrutinize this bill, because the role of the media is a constitutional one. So it's not that it's anything out of the ordinary. Holding the government accountable to the people is the core essence of the media.
Absolutely.
And that's inalienable, what's that? Freedom of expression?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Osun residents flee as soldiers battle police to free detained colleague. I mean, you get to see these kind of things now. Security agencies in, what's that, test of might, who's what. This will definitely impede on, you know, that interagency cooperation and the relationship they're supposed to have at this point in time where we're grappling with banditry, you know, and several other kinds of security challenges. But I don't know. That's what you find there. If you flip to the back page, Eagles are in top shape. Iguavoin, yeah. So, who knows? You got several others.
The Super Eagles?
Well, I just said Eagles. So, Iguavoin is leading the team, actually. So that means it's the other Eagles. But they're Eagles. I hope they saw, anyway.
It's good to hear.
Good experience for them.
Oh, yes.
So.
We'll take a look at Nigerian Tribune.
And no Mr. and Mrs. Okay, go ahead.
Where with the Eagles? I'm not sure they play.
There was some inalienable rights to Mr. and Mrs. every morning.
I don't know why this conspiracy
pushing it
is.
so far.
Almost sound like an entitlement mentality. Huh?
Yes,
Oh,
it
yeah.
is. It is.
Okay.
Please.
Is this for someone in particular or for a group of...
All we are saying.
Wow.
Oh, you are saying.
Take a look at the Nigerian Tribune's front page. Security agents colluding with bandits. Gumi, you see, Army's reply to him saying, stop making sweeping allegations. Because when you hear security agents, so that's the Army, the police, maybe the NSCDC, and other security agents
All
involved.
9 of them.
Yes, involved in this in this? Oh yeah, not just the army, the military, the air force, and the rest. So
The NDLEA, the customs, immigration.
So you might kind of understand why the army says stop making sweeping allegations. But there's still a lot to look into in this particular one. It's on page 3.
But if we find a way to tie this or connect it to what General Danjuma said some time ago, is this in a way confirming or affirming or another perspective to the same thing I said some time back?
Wow, that's a big one.
Who knows? I think context too come in to
Absolutely.
play in that particular one. Because with this one, you see several other matters associated with what is being reported here. So you just wonder sometimes, are they taking it in the entire context of that submission? Because it's completely different. So because if you look at that element, I'm not sure you can isolate that element of collusion from all the other preceding and subsequent contexts. There may be immediate setting or a whole, who knows?
Again, I mean, I think it's important to emphasize that context that you talked about, because people will go away with just a minor perspective simply because that's what's on the front page.
Still on that front page, there's this story at the bottom strip, just at the right-hand corner. It says, police inspector arrested for selling weapons to criminals in Cross River. I doubt they're related, clearly not related. Cross River, this one is banditry. So this is on page 29 of the Nigerian Tribune. Also another perspective, different areas to battle this insecurity. There are love stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, so I'm not exactly sure which one to choose, but let me give you this cheery one of sorts. Baby of NSAS protester christened gets scholarship from Oni's wife. Page 29. Her story trended, and it's good that there's some sort of, not happy ending, but at least a happy twist to this story, page 29 of the Nigerian Tribune. And this one, which some will say they're not quite surprised about, Anambra, Abga declares Soludo standard bearer. But that's not all. Faction suspends, accuses him of anti-party activities, and a lot of talks about court cases, and you just think, wow, I thought we've learned, or at least political parties have learned from this one. It's on page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Like I said, there's a lot more on the front page, but let's leave it there for you.
Well, that story about Abga having a standard bearer, interestingly, page 4 of The Guardian says, INEC insists Abga won't participate in Anambra Guba poll.
Whoa.
So,
Well, Abga is saying they have a standard bearer.
well, Abga is saying that, then INEC is saying so.
And a faction of Abga is saying another thing as well.
You know what? Go to page 4 of The Guardian newspaper.
Incidentally, page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune too.
Oh dear.
So the lead of The Guardian newspaper this morning is not so cheering. Airfares spike as aviation fuel nears 300 naira per litre at airports. And of course, the cost goes on the tickets. That's what's happening here with few riders. Logistics challenges, weak naira push Jet A1 to 215 naira in south, over 300 naira per litre up north. Akbakwa Port's congestion costs importers extra $10,000 to $25,000 daily. And there's a quote, "It's a shame no refinery produces Jet A1 locally," says Georgie. Find the details of that on the front page, goes to page 2. Right under the story, the picture you see there of members of the NYSC in Rakinladi Local Council of Plateau State. Beware of debt distress. Okonjo Iweala additional warn African leaders. Now, I don't know what this means. Maybe the inside pages will give us. You want to give us an idea?
Absolutely not. I just imagine some thinking, is it not too late for some? Hopefully not.
FG, the writers, FG spends 1.02 trillion naira on debt servicing in Q1 2021. That's what you have there. Explore taxes on revenues. Egypt Central Bank Governor advises. Borrowed funds should go into high-yielding activities, says ex-minister. And there's this one, debt relief may not lead to economic growth. Find out who said that. All the details you'll find on the inside pages, page 2 to be specific. And so many other stories. EFCC rearraigns 3 FIRS directors, 6 others over alleged 4.5 billion naira fraud. Stories on page 4. Incidentally, FIRS is also on that list you saw the other time.
Wow.
Concerning the Auditor General's report of 2015.
They all have things to do with huge revenue, those agencies.
Okay, well, that's the Guardian
boy.
newspaper this morning. Morning, Markwe.
Morning, gentlemen. I am looking at the stories on the front page. I was actually hoping to review this paper, not because of anything, but because of the picture. I think it's quite interesting that coppers made it to the front page. And I'm sure it's for good reason, too, when you look at the smile on their faces and the fact that they're doing good work, you know, in the communities that they're in. You just find out that sometimes as coppers, when you're in certain communities, you just fall in love with those communities. And sometimes the communities themselves look forward to having coppers around because of services like this. And I think it's very important while this debate is going on as to whether or not we should keep the NYSC. But look at that picture, worth 1,000 words indeed. You've done a good job reviewing The Guardian. Don't mind me, that was just my own interest. Let's look at New Telegraph for you. And they have what you've seen in most of the other papers, talking about security. Gumi, security agencies colluding with bandits. Says federal government fighting tribal war against herdsmen. That's what he is alleging on the front page this morning. And the New Telegraph has details of that particular story for you. Lots of opinion, too, on this particular story. I already read one this morning about whose side the sheikh is on. Is he on the side of the Nigerian people or is he on the side of the bandits? That's the question a number of opinion writers are asking. Page 2 to 4 will give you the context for this headliner, Gumi, security agencies colluding with bandits. Gumi trying to denigrate armed forces, that's according to the army. Government needs dialogue to resolve security crisis. In Wayamu, that's what you have on the front page. You have a number of other stories. ICPC, mafia groups frustrating anti-corruption war, says they've stalled reforms in petroleum, power, pension sectors. Federal government recovered $700 million assets in 6 years. Now, this is not the ordinary journalists speaking. These are the people who should know. The ICPC has been doing some serious investigation, and they say mafia groups. They didn't use the word cabal. Mafia is what they call them. You might want to read details on page 3, and I think you should be interested in Nigeria and why, you know, the petroleum sector is the way it is. We've been unable to pass PIB for as long as we can remember, since that bill made it to the National Assembly how many assemblies ago? Look at this one. Oil hits $76 per barrel, highest in over 2 years. OPEC Plus meeting on July 1 set to discuss further easing of curbs. NNPC, EFCC, DSS, others tighten news on oil thieves. So that's also there as well. But we have not been able to reap the benefits of high oil prices, sadly, as a result of other things that challenge us, such as debts and our inability to be able to reform the petroleum sector. 37.7% freight hike threatens Nigeria's 12.5 trillion naira export. So it looks like freight is costing us 37.7% extra. You might want to read details on page 5. Is it air freight? Is it, you know, freighting things internally, or is it getting them to the ports? What exactly is the story about? Well, you have a number of other stories just beneath the nameplate, which I'll leave you to do yourself, but you also see this one here. Insecurity, Northern Elders, Ohaneze task Buhari on restructuring, resolved to protect people of other ethnic groups in their regions. That's definitely good to see. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
All right, then. So there you go. That ends it. We'll look at some of the dailies here today. Well, back in a moment. To stay with us.
The usually busy road network in Tegina, Niger State is almost bare. Residents that move around do so only because they must. Others now prefer to stay indoors. It's been 21 days since the abduction of 136 students from this Islamic school, and the escape of some brought a glimmer of hope. However, a reminder that the vast number of those still in captivity quickly overshadows the joy. This is what has brought the state governor, Abubakar Bello, to meet with parents of the abducted students at the palace of the Emir of Kagara, where he assures them of the safe return of their children. He also wants them to work with the government for a speedy end to the matter.
Everyone should come out and cooperate with the security agencies as well as the government.
The chant of enthusiasm. These men, picked from various security agencies, are mandated to comb the forests in search of kidnappers and to rescue the students.
With the number of vigilantes that are here to support the police and the military, I'm hoping we're able to guard and protect most of the schools. We can't fold our arms anymore. We are determined to take necessary steps to deal decisively, using whatever means to apprehend those are involved.
Their motivation for the task ahead: the safe return of their children. Governor Bello lifts the spirits of the men even further.
You have made us proud. You have made Nigerian police and civil defense proud. You have made Nigeria and Nigerians proud.
Some parents are not in agreement with the plan by the state government, fearing backlash from the kidnappers. But at this point, this seems to be the only option, which authorities believe may just bring the needed results and return the children to their homes.
The recent school abductions we've seen across northwestern states particularly, it has again maybe shone a spotlight on the work of security agencies in rescuing these students and ensuring security across the nation. And we're talking from the military to the police to other paramilitary organizations in the country. And today we'll be speaking with Mr. Abu Adams, as you may have seen, who is a former Assistant Director, Internal Security, SSS. He joins us virtually on the program this morning. It's great to have you, Mr. Adams. Now, yesterday, we also saw governors from the Northwest region meeting with President Buhari. We had the governor of Kebbi, Zamfara, and Niger. And one trend you may have heard in their statements is the fact that they commended security agencies for the work they're doing, saying they're doing a great job. And, for me, I just thought we should start from this note. First, how hard is it as a security operative or security agency to operate in the current terrain we have in Nigeria? Just maybe we don't appreciate them enough. So let's begin from that point. How hard is it?
Good morning, presenter. I think, if I hear you well, you are talking about the issue of the insecurity in schools and abducted school children vis-a-vis the general security of our institutions.
Well, that's on a general note, but particularly now, I'm focusing on the role of security agencies. And I referenced the governors of Northwest States meeting with the president yesterday, and they all commended security agencies for the great work they're doing. I just thought we should start on that note. If you could give us a sense of just how hard is it for a security operative to do their job or do his or her job in the current terrain of Nigeria today?
Well, thank you very much. The fact is that it is very difficult for security agencies, as it were, to cover the whole of Nigeria's terrain. It's difficult because in the present dispensation across the world, security is heavily backed up by latest technology, which we don't have that level in this country. If you look at the application of technology so far, it is based on the presence of service providers. If you are hearing me.
Yes, please go ahead.
We don't have this partial intelligence equipment that you can help us to pinpoint specific places where you have bandits, where you have terrorists, and for security agencies to move in. If you look at most of our operations, they are mostly reacting to incidences. I know several times anyway we have been able to take the war to their places, but they are mostly reacting. And it's because we don't have our what we call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, backed up by latest technology, has not been very effective, and so that is why we find it difficult to be everywhere. Secondly, if you look at the population of the various security agencies, from the statistic we had last, the army about 150. The police about maybe over 300 to between 300 to 400, and other security agencies down the line. I think that is for that. But notwithstanding that, I think, in my opinion, security agencies, in view of their capacity, their resources, and motivation, I think they are doing the best under the circumstances. But let me say that if we are talking about our higher institutions, our educational institutions.
Just one moment, Mr. Adams, before you go to the... Just one moment, Mr. Adams. Just one moment, Mr. Adams, before you go to the schools. You mentioned the other time that we don't have those technologically advanced equipment that our security personnel need to do their jobs, and you have also talked about the numerical strength. I'm curious, and I think many people will be concerned, worried even, that with all of the resources deployed over the years,
of course, we can't even begin to mention the number of the figures that have been thrown out as to the quantum of resources that have been deployed for security operatives, for security equipment and all of that, coupled with the intervention of state governments all across the country. So the question on my mind right now is, and you'd also remember that there was an attempt to even ask questions around how we have spent our security budgets over the years to at least try to justify the spending, because it would seem like we're spending money, we're not getting results, and then see what else needs to be added. So I'm wondering, is it the absence of the technology that we do not have? Is it the absence of the technology, or the fact that we don't even have the latest one? What exactly, in your opinion, is the problem?
Thank you very much. You talked about the resources, massive resources that have been deployed, particularly from the federal government. But you have always heard of the various accusations of either misapplication of funds or outright looting of funds over the years that were supposed to be committed to this cause. Don't forget that that is a major setback, and government has several times, especially the present government, that most of the equipment they had placed order are yet to come, because these are not the kind of equipment that we buy from off the shelf. I think, but the important thing is, have we always had the will to be futuristic in our requirement for security and intelligence infrastructure? We discovered that it was when this crisis started that we began to think of ordering equipment and things like that. But if you look at nations like Egypt and some other countries, even in Africa, they try to walk ahead of what they have. So now we are in great deficit of those requirements, both personnel. If you look at the police, for instance, over the years there has still been agitation between the office of the IG, the Police Service Commission, to recruit personnel. And on a daily basis, the force is being depleted by retirement, by killings, and so on and so forth. And we need to act fast and take prompt decisions. Let there be a systematic and organized recruitment, like by other agencies, like the Army does. All the time, they hardly obliterate any of their recruitment exercise. That is fine, but it should be at a larger scale now that we look at, because we have so much of security challenges across the country. But let me also say this, that the level we have come, it is a thing that all of us, if we take the schools, for instance, ever since the Chibok girls, there have been no systematic arrangement to respond to attacks. If you take boarding schools, for instance, in a state, why is it difficult for each boarding school to synergize with their private security, their internal security, the police, the army, to have a response team standing by always in nearby area, that each time they have a challenge, they should be able to call upon them. How do you feel when over 200 students, within 2 hours, bandits come there, operate, and take them away, and there's no instant response? I think we should
Adams, there's something that you
across the country.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things now, and I'm just wondering how we can prioritize. Now, in one breath, you've spoken about paucity of equipment on the one hand, and the fact that those equipment are usually not up to date by the time they arrive for our use. And in the same breath, you've spoken about the inadequacy of personnel and the challenges we've been having with recruitment and all of that. From your experience as a former director at
the SSS, if you were to advise priority, personnel or equipment, which one would you advise that we prioritize now, at least to keep the schools safe?
Thank you very much. If I am in position to act now, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Now, immediately I will resolve the presidency should immediately resolve the issue of recruitment between the IG's office and the Police Service Commission. And let there be recruitment into the police every 6 months. In this way, as some are passing out, a new set is coming in. That is number one. Number two, right now, because of the challenges that we have, active retirees in the various services, particularly the army, the police, some people who retire, yes, but they are still very active, should be called in to increase our capacity. And then, if you take of our general insecurity, there should be mobilization, adequate. We have talked about police, community policing. How many of them are very active? Every community now in this country should organize their youth, bring them to, in collaboration with security agencies, just like the president commended extensively the success of civilian JTF in Borno State. Such group should be active now across the country in aid of security agencies, of course, under their supervision. It's not that they will go out solo and begin to do their thing. And this is possible. It's not as if it's not possible. And when it comes to logistics, whatever logistics we are placing orders now, we should be thinking of what we are going to use in the next 10 years and begin to require for them in the various markets and among our various international customers and supporters. Not until we wait, there will be a new dimension to a crime and we'll begin to shout, how are we going to go about it? That's exactly what I'll do.
Well, Mr. Adams, given your background, whatever happens to, because it appears as though it's glossed over whenever it's mentioned, perhaps not given the kind of attention it requires. Some may think it may be insignificant. It is such that the questions as to security agencies or our internal mechanisms here, do we need to introspect in terms of the security agencies double-checking themselves because allegations here and there against them? How seriously do you think we should consider those as well?
Thank you very much. In the kind of massive security operations across the country, you cannot afford not to have excesses of some individuals. But let me say that what should be done, I give you a typical example of an officer, a video that was currently going around. I want to say that such a situation should not just be looked at from the punitive aspect. The case should be investigated by the authority and let the investigating team be multidisciplinary, even including the civilians, so that they can profile solutions. If you look at another incident that happened, I think somewhere in the southeast, where a policeman was said to have gone up, of course, I'm happy the case is being investigated. But you cannot afford not to have such. But the important thing is that in each case, it should be promptly investigated and the solution found into it. And I also am aware, if you take the police, they have the experts, and so also, even in the Department of State Services, you cannot just do anything and get away with it. That I am very sure. It's one of the organizations that whatever operation you are doing, you are looking back at what are the legal implications of any excess. And so I want to urge other agencies to intensify that. But the public should not use that against the services and begin to castigate them. Others might be put in fear. And the situation we have now, we need every courage that we can muster for us to get over our security challenges.
What would you consider? Because now we see governors resorting to recruiting vigilantes, arming them. That's a vote of no confidence on the normal security architecture, some might add. what would you consider as the biggest challenge that we need to address such that things can pull together to address the challenges we're faced today?
Okay, I think the major challenge that we have now is from my experience is that there is a major spread of the bandits, the terrorists that are being attacked, especially in the northwest, northeast, and then part of the southeast. And so every community now must be at large to work with security agencies. Areas that you think before now have been quiet, you might not know that these guys, having been, pushed out of their comfort zone, will be moving to those areas. And that is the more reason why Nigerians must arise, organize yourselves, the various hunter groups, the various community leaders, youth organizations, in areas that you think are quiet, to identify these guys and let the security officers move in for in national operation.
Do you agree with those who think that politicization of security is part of the big challenge that we face today?
Can you come in again? I didn't hear that well.
Do you agree with those who think that we have politicized security and their functions, and that is a big challenge today?
That security
has been politicized.
Has been
politicized. Can you hear me?
Have been stressed.
Oh dear, I think the network is. Can you still hear me though?
The network is bad. I can't hear you well now.
All right. Okay, well, we'll see how we can do, but let's give it one more try and see if it is any better, because sometimes, yeah, it can fluctuate. I was asking if you share or subscribe to the school of thought for those who think that there is a huge politicization of security and as such is affecting the functions and how some perceive the functions of security agencies.
If I hear you, you are talking about politicization of security agencies.
Yeah.
I think I don't see any kind of politicization at that level. But what I want to say is that, particularly at the state government level, they should ensure that directives, because most of their complaint is that they are not in charge of the police, of security agencies. I think the issue they have always had with security agencies is that when the heads of these security agencies discover that they might want to use them against political opponents, they decide they will decline such orders. But it's not as if they see a real security breach and governors or local government chairman call them to intervene, they will not. I think the earlier the politicians put their political interests aside and look at the national interest when it comes to utilization of security agencies in achieving appropriate security at all levels. So we must learn to leave security agencies to do their job. We must learn to cooperate with them, and we must learn to put our individual political interests aside when we want to engage our security operatives to carry out any assignment.
Okay, so Mr. Abu, we've had over 800 students kidnapped since December last year, and since 2014, about 600 schools have closed as a result of fears of insecurity and kidnappings, ever since we had Chibok. And sadly, we seem to be seeing that trend. So that's where we began from, this school kidnappings. Do we have any excuse, really, to see another school kidnap happen in Nigeria?
Another what?
Another school kidnap happen in Nigeria.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Please still repeat it.
Okay, let me try this one more time. I was asking if there's really any excuse? With the spate of school kidnappings we've seen in recent times, is there any excuse again to have another kidnap happen on our watch?
Oh, my God. I'm still very sorry. I can't hear you well.
Well, I'm sorry as well. I really wish you could hear me, but I guess we'll just end this conversation for now at this point. I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Abu Adams, for at least making this network fluctuation work so far. Thank you so much for your time on the program. Well, we'll go on a break and we'll return with another issue. Join us again.
As directed by the leadership of the House of Representatives, 5 committees meet with the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, to unravel the circumstances leading to the Twitter suspension and its legality.
The platform of choice.
The minister begins by explaining the reasons behind the suspension and alleges complicity of Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey in the EndSARS protest.
The same Twitter played a very unsettling role by making available its platform to retweet, not just retweet the messages of the EndSARS protesters, but raising funds for the EndSARS protesters before it was hijacked by hoodlums. Jack Dorsey crowdfunded the activities of EndSARS. That's why we believe that Twitter's mission in Nigeria is suspect.
He goes further to quote laws which empowered the federal government to issue the suspension.
But until so incorporated, the foreign company shall not carry on business in Nigeria or exercise any powers of a registered company. That's the Section 78(1) of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020.
But lawmakers question the timing of the suspension, which came just after the president's tweet was taken down, and are also concerned about the negative impact on businesses which depend on Twitter.
The pressure that people have is that the Twitter took down a statement that was made by the president, just like how they took down a statement that was made by Donald Trump of America.
We have to consider the economic dethronement of the mass of Nigerian youths who live and survive trading on Twitter, doing so many other things. We did not suspend the activities of Twitter because they deleted Mr. President's tweet. Not at all. Have we taken into consideration Nigerians doing business on Twitter? And the answer is yes. There are other platforms, Facebook, Google Hangout, WhatsApp, for people to use.
The Minister of Information says that the federal government has approved a committee to engage with Twitter, and that as part of the conditions for lifting the suspension, Twitter must first register with the Corporate Affairs Commission and get a license, and that subsequently all the conditions will follow. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Well, the conversation around Twitter and whether or not it's been banned, suspended, why that happened is not going away anytime soon. Don't forget that recently the ECOWAS court had a ruling stopping the Nigerian government from prosecuting those who insist on still using Twitter despite the ban or suspension, whichever one you prefer. Well, we have with us this morning Mr. Enya Kinshallah, who's the advisor, lead publicity executive, Agogo Publishers. You're welcome to Sunrise Early this morning.
My pleasure, Julia. Good morning.
Well, you are an information man, and you have also been, you've been a journalist, and also you've been on the other side, for lack of a better term to use now, as if there were two sides. But yes, if one were to interpret it in that manner, did you see this coming in terms of government interface with Twitter and how offended it felt when the president's tweet was pulled down?
I think we started on a very wrong footing. I mean, government and Twitter. The issue was not a government thing. It was Mr. or President Muhammad Buhari in his capacity. That tweet was his personal tweet, quote and unquote. And if he had issues with Twitter's pulling down, I think the first thing should have been to engage with Twitter, not to suspend Twitter and its activity in Nigeria. Other gaffes followed immediately. Other goofs followed. Where we are today, therefore, is what can we get from it?
Now, I want you to enumerate what you consider the other goofs.
The other goofs was that we saw the Honorable Minister of Information coming to explain some things and then banning, quote and unquote, or suspending. Was it a ban? Was it a suspension? Then the Honorable Attorney General coming to say that whoever uses alternatives will be, these are goofs and gaffes that were unnecessary. Immediately, the ban or suspension was announced. What ought to follow after the first gaffe is engagement with Twitter. How do we do it? Then other gaffes, like, okay, we want to regulate OTPs, all this. There are other goofs and gaffes. Those things could come outside of this crisis.
Why do you consider them gaffes?
What I mean is if Twitter did not have any issue with the president, would they have come out? If yes, why did they come out around that point? So when you muddle the waters, you create confusion in the populace, there is a poor understanding of your intentions, and people can go wrong wild with the ideas of what you are trying to do. If government wanted to regulate practitioners in the social media space, it should be an action that will be taken outside of Mr. President's altercation with Twitter. So these are goose and gas. But as I've said, maybe they have paused, there's a rewind, and maybe they are restarting. But I also saw a lot of funny things. If the group that is to represent Nigeria with Twitter, we should have tech guys who understand how this works, not necessarily political office holders. Maybe a lawyer to fine-tune other things, but tech guys who understand what benefits there are for Nigerians, who understand what opportunities there are for Nigerians, and who could leverage on this opportunity to negotiate what is best for our cyberspace, for our economy, and for our security. But what do we have? People probably don't run their own Twitter account. People probably don't have the most basic knowledge of social media, but that is us.
So it would seem that, well, some people will say that generally the problem that has been raised, even though the minister, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, continues to insist that it is not because Twitter pulled down the president's tweet, that's the reason why they have clamped down on the social media app in Nigeria. Even though he continues to insist
believe that you believe in other things.
Well, I don't know about you, but that's what he says.
Okay.
There have been problems in general with governments, and not just governments, but let's say governments, countries, nations, those who deal with security and social media. It's not a uniquely Nigerian problem, so to speak. How do you think that, as a developing nation, our problems seem to be a little more compound? I mean, we have brought in security into the matter, and as in Nigeria here, staying as one, secession and all those manner of talks, there are huge fears of that and the power that social media could wield, and even the power that external forces could wield through social media. What are your thoughts on that as we navigate, as we're moving forward in this technologically driven age?
A very basic thing about governance and information is openness. If we have the right kind of relationship between the government and the governed, the fear of manipulation is drastically reduced. I didn't say eliminated. It's drastically reduced. When government says things, people believe that for what it is. People see government as representing them truly and truly. That's the very basic thing. The other thing is that in societies where there are problems managing social media, they do not manage it on the social media. They go below the radar. get their acts right, get their policies well formulated, get their plans of action well articulated, then take action. But here, we start our own from the public. We voice out, then we begin to think of how we do it. That's the difference. In what way are we going to use the social media to help tackle insecurity? That ought to have been discussed, outlined. The methods ought to be engaged, ought to have been done. In what way are we going to use social media regulation to correct insecurity problems? That ought to have been outlined. But we strike first, then look at the reaction before we think. So that's the difference between us and other societies. If there were no issues between Twitter and Mr. President, and all these things have been outlined, government would have engaged society, interested members of society, core stakeholders, quote unquote, as they are called, and engage them. This is what we are thinking. And we discuss. There is an agreement. So when the policy is pushed out, it gets received almost immediately. So it will only be those who have extreme views that will be opposed to it. And those who have extreme view anywhere in society, globally, are infinitesimal part of society. But when you do not engage those who have moderate views, when you do not engage the larger mass, those who have extreme views take over this airspace.
In this conversation, I find it interesting, first and foremost, that you keep on saying if Twitter did not have any problems with Mr. President or Mr. President did not have any problems with Twitter, it would seem that you are restricting it to these two people, when it would seem that it is the government of Nigeria that has now taken it on. But in this case, in the situation whereby the president's tweet was pulled down, do you think that was did you see a problem with that in the first instance?
It's not a big problem. Now, how do social media platforms...
But it is a problem.
It's not a big problem. If you pull down my own thing, it's a problem. I'm a citizen. If Twitter pulls down your thing, it's a problem. But it's not a big problem in the sense that such actions take place because people report those accounts. Twitter don't just wake up and take action. If I say something that people feel is offensive, people will report my account to Twitter. And Twitter will look at the algorithm. People will look at the inflow of information on that and take action. That is how it has always been. The same thing for Facebook. So it's when Twitter now takes action, you engage. Hello, this is what we have done. Why is this happening? Over 2-3 hours, that could be resolved. So it's taking down, there are rules of engagement with social media platforms. If you do so, and so number of people flag that, Twitter will act.
Yeah, but in your own analysis, do you think that that tweet was problematic?
It's not problematic in that these are private enterprises. There are rules. You come to my platform.
No, I mean the tweet itself, the tweet that was pulled down.
For me, it is. It is because we have a security situation on our hands. It is because we have had instances where much more damage has been done. And the utterances and body language of Mr. President was not that aggressive, was not that poignant, was not that active. It was passive, almost like supportive of those. So, and because we are, quote unquote, a thoroughly divided society, such utterances must weigh the ramifying effect of the outcome. And we had a history, a civil war that has dogged us in terms of, have we really forgotten it? Have we put it behind us? No. Some of the things around the civil war are still resonating with us. So I would think that Mr. President would be a little bit more introspective, a little bit more sober before reading such a tweet. Because we have seen the case of the Tutsis and Hutus. We have seen other societies where utterances trigger things. For instance, the dot thing statement of Mr. President. It looks harmless ordinarily, but it is harmful because we are divided, because we are mutually apprehensive of our actions, of our words, of our inactions. So this is not the time to be reckless, to be unguided in whatever we say or do. This is the time to be deliberately sober. Because this country, and I say this to everybody, I am one of those who believe that this country has a future, but not on the grounds under which we run it. Not under this. We have to rework it. we have to build confidence in the system. We have to believe that the Constitution is for all of us, irrespective of where you come from. And until we do that, utterances like that, rather than be seen on the face value, will be seen for its underlying meanings.
So let's fast forward now from the president's statement, because he did not type that statement initially. It wasn't a statement released like we'll see press statements. It was a conversation in context where INEC officials had gone to visit him and talk about the damage happening to a number of their facilities around the country, but particularly in the southeast of the country. And that's where he made that particular statement. Some people have made a differentiation between the president speaking off the cuff and the manner in which he spoke and when it was written. I don't know if you saw that differentiation. That is there. But then let's fast forward to where we currently are. I mean, according to you, the gaffes and the goofs that have now been made, and now we have a committee to engage with Twitter. But before that time, we saw some people who felt very aggrieved go to the ECOWAS court in the wake of the Attorney General saying they're going to prosecute those who still tweet, even though some people dared and said, Attorney General, we're waiting for you to come and arrest us. Because according to them, their laws, I mean, the laws upon which the Attorney General hopes to rely, which he still hasn't named, seem to be quite spurious. Nonetheless, some people are taking no chances and have gone to the ECOWAS court. Now, that ruling has come out. The Nigerian government says it is considering the ruling. They're still studying the judgment. But then they have begun to question the legality and the jurisdiction of the ECOWAS court. And some people wonder if that kind of court will hold any weight. I mean, the ruling from that sort of court will hold any weight, unless the weight that the members attach to it. What are your thoughts?
Since we are signatories to the protocols of ECOWAS, we are bound by it. But you see, I also don't see...
They're bound by it, but how much weight, how much importance have we attached to the ruling?
The weight we are ready to attach to it.
Indeed.
You see...
So do you think it was worthwhile going to get a judgment from that court, knowing that...
It is a good thing because it's an opportunity to resolve it rather than to complicate it. And I actually think that what government should do is, look, now there's an opportunity to resolve it. Why not latch on that opportunity and say, okay, gentlemen, this is what the courts have said, though we have issues with it, but being Democrats, let us allow it the way, and then we'll walk on from there. It solves a lot of problems. It's a win-win for every one of us. It's a win-win for every one of us. You can even argue that, look, though we do not believe that the judgment is made in good conscience, you can just say a lot of things, but because we want to douse this tension, because we feel that our people have the right to voice out legitimately, let us move forward. But we keep on complicating simple things.
You have had cause to advise the head of a subnational government before, especially with regards to handling information. How do you think that, information sometimes gets out of hand and the situation gets beyond control, or it would seem that government is struggling to control it? What are the dynamics that happens behind the scenes?
When there are too many sources, outlets for information, there will be confusion. And I say this with all due respect. There are too many outlets for information for this government. For instance, there was no need for any Attorney General to come out to talk about what the President was handling. The Attorney General should give up legal, verified, constitutionally guaranteed legal opinion when asked. Otherwise, there are media minders of Mr. President who should sit down, plan, and release statements on behalf of Mr. President. Even Mr. President's speeches should be vetted by media minders, and with all due respect, there are very good hands involved there. But I don't know to what extent they have been involved in managing of information. I am sure from what I have seen that a lot of people talk out of the media team. From what I have seen, I've seen ministers say things that will end up not being the total truth. Meanwhile, there ought to be a clearing house for the information of government. In most cases, when it comes to the government, the Honorable Minister of Information is the one to voice out. But when it comes to the presidency, the principal is the media team, to be represented by who is the anchor point at that point. It could be the special advisor, it could be the senior social advisor, it could be whoever they want. It all depends on the level of engagement. You could make an essay, special assistant to release a statement on behalf of the presidency, but it must have been well processed. So that while you are engaging an essay is because of the value, the premium you place on who initiated the idea or what information you want to pass across. If it's high state information, then you are likely going to use the special advisor or the senior social advisor. So it depends on the synergy within the system. I do not see such a synergy. I may be wrong, but I can tell you there are bright hands that I've seen, that I've worked with either as a journalist, and recently I met one of them and I voiced my opinion on the issue that I may disagree with your principle on a number of things, but there are some things that I agree with. One, we can't release this country to the hands of people I call Ifunpa, Ibadi, or Tumopo generals. We cannot release this country in the hands of warlords, street warlords. We must take hold of this country and get out of our problems by discussing them. Every war ends in a discussion somehow. Every war. In the religious era, in the Quran, in the Bible, in societies that are as old as time, every war ends in a discussion. So why not discuss before the war? My own thing is that let us engage. When people have issues, instead of demonizing them, engage them. And once you engage and you know that these are unreasonable people, let the society know the level, the extent of their unreasonableness. But we cannot be gravitating aimlessly towards the precipice because we are not thinking and we are not talking.
Have we made a storm out of a teacup with this suspension or ban on Twitter in Nigeria? Some people have said, oh, it's indicative of government's intolerance to opposition. Oh, it's indicative of government's intention to stifle free speech. There have been all manner of things read into this ban on
we
Twitter.
We have not.
But
it is this and more. It is indicative of this. But what is more fundamental?
You believe that it is indicative of that?
This and more. What is more is this. We have failed to realize that the youth content of our population is high. Largely unengaged, largely unemployed. Some unemployable. Now, but most of these have found space within the social media to get engaged. I know of people who sell things on social media, young people who have no job, people who do network marketing on social media. Now, Twitter is the most active outlet for such. And you have cut off their means of survival, their means of engagement, their means of satiating their worries, their anxieties, their pressures. So it is much more than the fact that you are suppressing the right of the people to voice out. You are also suppressing their means of livelihood. People don't see it from that perspective. I know of young people who...
When that was put to the minister, he said, oh, they can go to other platforms. There's WhatsApp, there's Facebook, there's Instagram. They can do that.
With all due respect, the minister has a little understanding of this platform. I'm sorry. He's an elderly person and I defer to elders. I'm brought up that way. I'm configured to see elders. But part of the problem is that the minister really do not have an understanding of what is happening. He has informants who are also not giving him the right information or who he's not listening to. You cannot compare Twitter to Facebook or WhatsApp. You cannot. The factors, the reality under which they operate are different. A tweet in 10, 20 minutes can be engaged by a more global audience than a Facebook account. So these are things that I see it as some of the gaps that we should not think about. And you see, I also had this thing about we could develop local alternative. My own argument is it's not when you have a crisis that you start thinking of developing a local alternative. What have you been doing since the art was created? Why not thinking of local alternative? Why not engage these young people? Why not creating an IT hub all across the states and ask people, give them targets, fund them, and say, we want an alternative within so and so period.
So what are your thoughts now on the fact that we're beginning to think of licensing social media handles. I mean, there's been all that kind of argument, and it would seem that it's a valid one because a number of countries have been raising issue with giants like Google, saying that the advertisements they place in their countries, which are seen in their own countries, that Google needs to pay tax on them. And so we've seen lawsuits whereby these big tech giant companies are forced to now pay tax, you know, in some countries as a result of that. So do you think that this idea of trying to license, you know, big tech in Nigeria will work for them to be able to operate?
I do not see a crime in attempting to make economic gains of this. I do not say a crime, but it must be well-reasoned, well-thought-out plans. You don't do this knee-jerk kind of thing and expect results. You must plan well. What if Twitter and they meet and say, let us discuss it, and you're not ready? You don't even know where you can. So it's a different thing. Let us reason well. Let us plan well before we take actions. I am not opposed to government giving out rules of engagement in the society. But they must be seen to be fair to all. They must not be seen to be born out of malice. They must not be anger-driven. They must be well-reasoned, well-rationed, well-thought-out policies and strategies of government to engage and to benefit for the society. But if it is to benefit, to protect the government against the people, then that is not right. The people should be protected against the government. The people who vested power in the government, and if insensible part of them, should not be the victims, while the government, who is there in representative capacity, should be the villain, or should be the one oppressing them. Pardon me. So once we think things out, once we reason them out, our actions will be seen to be altruistic, will be seen to be rational, will be seen to be acceptable to all, will not be seen as vindictive. And that's my argument. If government wants to engage with Twitter, with Google, with all this, let that be. But first and foremost, it should not be on this premise, on this basis. And let us engage first before we make noise. You see?
What do you think, in this engagement right now, do you think that we have sufficient leverage as a government, one? I'm sure, of course, we are a big market for a number of tech giants, and they should be interested in coming to Nigeria more specifically, as when you look at our numbers, the youth bulge, and even what's possible here. But do you think that so far so good, we have are we the kind of people that they can say, look, okay, you guys don't want us here, no problem. We simply black Nigeria out?
No right-thinking business entity will black out anybody. But when the cost of doing business threatens the overall cost of that business entity, you can take a decision to leave. So while we are pushing, we must do a SWOT analysis. We must do an opportunity cost of our engagement. If we drive them out, what do we gain as a society? That is, if we out-negotiate them, we outmaneuver them, and they feel that, wow, instead of doing this, we are not going to do it. Let's move out. What will be the loss to Nigeria, to our economy, to our society, to our youth? What will be the implication on our security? What will be on the social tension? Because we are going to release more young people into the society who have been disengaged from what I could call a distraction, quote and unquote. They engage now because there is nothing to do, and yet they are making life out of it. They eke out some means of livelihood from it. So you must consider all these options. But if you try to negotiate with them and it becomes a threat to their business model, they will opt out. So we must factor in all this. That's why I say you need the experts, people who know the nitty-gritty of their actions. It is what you know that can really understand.
So you think that team needs to be reviewed, the team that should engage with
that team is a political team. That team is not a team that will get much out of, except, if they have a backup team of experts and technocrats. And for me, I think the first thing is the expert and technocrat meeting them first before you put political seal to it. Because when you put your first foot forward, you get concessions that are infinitesimal, concessions that will not add any value to you, and you bring it back, home to your technical experts and they tell you you've got nothing.
Well, I'm sure a lot of Nigerians will sincerely hope that would not be the case.
I hope so.
But we have to say thank you so much for
My pleasure,
sharing
always.
your thoughts with us this morning. Enya Kinshallah is an advisor, lead publicity executive at Google Publishers. Sunrise Daily will continue in a moment. Please stay with us. Well, we're going to be considering something else. I mean, this morning you saw in the papers Sheikh Ahmed Gumi alleging that military, police have been aiding and abetting bandits in their operations. Now, they have vehemently, that's the Nigerian army at least, have vehemently denied that their own agency has any such thing to do with bandits. But then there have been those who say perhaps it's time for some introspection, and they have reason to do so. We have with us this morning Mr. Oweb Nwoko, who's a senior advocate of Nigeria and a former Attorney General of Akwa Ibom State. Sir, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me this morning.
Thank you for coming. Now, I'm sure that when you see stories like this, Sheikh Gumi fingers military police in bandit operations, you will say there could be an element of truth in that from the experience that you have had.
Certainly. Certainly. I am not, let me begin by saying I'm not a real fan of Sheikh Gumi. But when it comes to issues like this, I think that introspection is the word. They need to, everybody needs to take it seriously, not just to attack it or deny it. Because from experience, it's very clear, obvious, there are facts to prove it, that on several occasions, at several instances, there are situations where security agents, there are bad eggs everywhere, would connive or be involved in criminal activities. So my take is that the Nigerian army does not need to engage in a quick denial. They rather should engage in self-introspection. They should rather check with their back. If somebody tells me now, sir, there is a stain on your dress, the first thing I do is to look at whether it is true or not to tell that person you are calling me dirty. The quick reaction of the Nigerian army would not solve the problem, and I don't think it's the right way to go. I believe that they should rather sit back and say, okay, sorry, this thing has been said. And Sheikh Gumi, if you have information, please pass to us. That will help more. Or even on the other hand, Sheikh Gumi doesn't really have all the facts. They can sit down on their own and check through their ranks and see whether this has happened. Like when I was Attorney General, I had a situation where I think at least 3 cases where police officers were involved in kidnapping. In 2 cases, there were convictions. There was a particular case where we had 7 accused persons. 3 of them were policemen. I think 2 sergeants and 1 constable.
I'm just first of all wondering, we've seen these cases, even though it didn't seem that they were widely publicized at the time. This happened in 2019, one of the cases which you referred to in 2019. Yeah. I'm just wondering, what piqued the suspicion of those who investigated these particular cases, and how did they have the courage to be able to, pinpoint their own people as part of those having a hand in this kinds of situation?
That is the point. Very few, in every setup, very few persons will be the one that will give bad name to the agency. Whether it is the army, it's the police, the navy, and whatever. It is, the bad eggs are there, just like in any other situation. So they are honest ones who, once they begin their process of investigation, they will follow and get the lead until it gets to a particular point. There's another case I can give you, an instance. A young lady was, I think, just met a young man, and maybe they were getting into a relationship, whatever happened. The bottom line is that the girl followed the guy to his house. For whatever reason, the girl died in the house. The guy got up that night. Possibly, maybe there was refusal or some, whatever they disagreed on. But there were marks of struggle on the girl's face and neck when the investigation went on. The guy went up, contacted his friend. A friend went up and contacted the police inspector. The trial is still going on now at the High Court in Akwa Ibom State. The police officer said, okay, I will take 200,000 naira from you and manage this case. They went together that night, picked the girl, the cops, put in a vehicle, and took the dead body outside Uyo to a village, a local mortuary in one village, and dumped there. And the only saving grace was that they gave the phone number of the girl's mother, which I think they took from the phone, to the mortuary attendant. The mortuary attendant collected this because he was the police inspector who he knew that brought that corpse and left. They never went back there. The mortuary attendant now called that number, and the mother of the girl answered, and they now left the place. Eventually, who brought him? The guy knew the police inspector. The police inspector was eventually arrested. The boy who killed the girl was arrested, and the friend, 3 of them, were taken together. And it was the police that investigated and indicted the guy that he was involved in the aftermath of that conspiracy. So it's not that it's not in existence. There are honest policemen, there are honest soldiers, there are honest people working in various sectors of the Nigerian system, where when things come to, they don't mind whether it's their colleague that is involved. They will get to the bottom of it and they will insist on the truth. So these are things happen. These are all the cases we find here and there.
Do we celebrate those colleagues who are courageous enough, at least to encourage others?
That should be done.
Who seek to, be that courageous as well? Because some people will say that some of the people you have mentioned now, they're low-level officers, sergeants and what have you. That there are those who could be in places of authority who are also aiding and abetting, some of them seniors. And that perhaps if we did celebrate those who had the courage to be able to call out people within their own force, perhaps it will give them
encouragement.
Yes, to be able to do that.
And even others to also do the same thing. I agree with you completely. But you see, the question is how often do we have these kind of persons celebrated? While I was also in office, we had a conviction of 4 policemen. They went out on patrol and had an issue with an Okada man. And one of them shot the Okada man. Of course, it was a team thing. And the Okada man died on the spot. They were arrested. It's policemen in the same Akwa Ibom command that investigated the matter and gave us the case file. And we prosecuted and got the 4 policemen convicted for murder. So it's not as if you don't need to hide them. You don't need to just jump up and say, I want to defend my institution. No, it is better that everyone, once this allegation is raised, that we should begin to check through. After all, there is no sector of the society that is devoid of people of this. A few days ago, a medical doctor was arrested for being involved in a drug. It was on television. I saw it on your studio quite news several times. The other day, a lawyer was arrested for conniving with criminals. So there is no sector that is devoid. Lecturers are being arrested for criminal activities. School principals. There is nobody there's no sector. So once allegation like this is raised, I believe that Shegumi possibly has some information. It may be his approach, it may be the style, maybe the timing. But the Nigerian Army and other security agencies should not just jump up and try to brush up the matter and say, oh, no, it doesn't. You should not mention our name or it doesn't happen. No, it is more important for the sake of the society, for the sake of nipping or tackling this insecurity in the country, that the Nigerian Army and other security agencies should begin to do a self-search and check through their system and monitor. When you send people out, you should be able to check up a backup system that now monitors the other team, knowing fully well that anything can happen. And there's so much temptation in the system. There are a lot of them that you cannot really hold back and say, oh, you can trust Mr. A the way you trusted Mr. B. So when you send people out on mission, you should be able to have a way of reassessing the performances of those people. It's very important. As an Attorney General, I had these instances, and it wasn't a story. We even have situations where, in the course of investigation, there are policemen that are honest enough to go very deep and get you the truth of the facts. In the same system, you have policemen that will go in and they want to kill the case and collect money. We can't deny it. There are real facts. There are real situations. So Mr. Gumi has made a statement, and it's not just a blanket thing. We should not put a blanket cover on, oh, it is the army are corrupt, the police are corrupt.
He did. And oftentimes that is what these agencies fear, that as a result of this kinds of statement, people will just use one paintbrush to smear the entire organization. It's a legitimate fear, you would agree?
Yes, it is. It is. That is. But you see, that legitimate fear of saying, "Oh, don't paint all of us in the same black color," that should not stop the agencies involved in doing what they ought to do. That self-introspection is very important. You would recall some time ago there were issues of some Catholic priests, both in Nigeria and outside, being involved in certain unwholesome activities with young children. What did the Pope need to do? You to set up a team to investigate it. Don't just say, oh, no, we want to protect the institution. No, the issue, the focus should not be on protecting the image of the institution. We all know, the society knows that it's not all of them that are bad. In fact, the number of bad eggs in the system are very few. Just that bad news sells faster. People want to hear more of that. But it doesn't mean that all of them are bad or that there's something to the positive aspects of their effort. They are doing well. They are trying. So many of them are putting their lives on there. So many of them have lost their lives in the process. Their children are now suffering. So we give credit to them. We respect them. We honor them. We wish we can do more to recognize the efforts of these security agencies and the security agents who put their life on the line for us to sleep with our eyes closed. But that doesn't mean that among them and within their system, there are no bad eggs. We cannot just take and say, oh, let's push it aside. I talk from experience because in the course of acting, I was Attorney General by the grace of God for 6 years. And in those 6 years, I saw a lot in terms of case files. I saw a lot in terms of investigation. And there is a lot of work to be done inside.
I was just about to make reference to the amount of work, because what some people will say is that when we see those kind of lapses, what it should indicate to us is that there is a need to strengthen internal mechanisms of checks, especially when it comes to the issue of arms. Because right now we're dealing with the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And some people have been saying, oh, oftentimes we point fingers upwards and say, oh, it's because our borders are porous. Oh, there was war in Libya, and as a result, it found its way into Nigeria. But we're not making reference, it would seem, enough to those that are being sold in-house. I mean, what you're making reference to is not exactly strange, because this has been well documented. In the wake of the Niger Delta crisis, there were very strong reports, and this was not rumored, it was documented, that the armory of the Nigerian military was open, and that there were those who were selling weapons to aid the strife, it would seem, in the Niger Delta. So as a result of that, do you think that we, as a people, and even within the security agencies, have placed checks on being able to account for the armors and the weapons that we have in our armory?
See, this is a very critical issue. Unfortunately, in one of our matters, in the court of appeal, one of the court of appeal decisions I like making reference to, the judge that gave the lead judgment said, truth is not a common vegetation on this planet. People don't like facing the truth. As we are talking now, check through this country in various parts. Do you know that let the police be very sincere about their system? In some states in this country, in some places, policemen are buying their bullets from black markets.
That's true.
They need to check it. This is not, I'm not raising alarm. Policemen are buying some of their bullets from black markets. This AK-47 they are carrying, they are buying packets from black markets. And I'm sure if they want to sit down and check through, they will know where those things are sold. Whether they are taken from the official armory, or it is imported illegally, but it's there in circulation. Is there in circulation? They need to tell the truth. A lot of the weapons that are being circulated, we have very porous borders, we must admit it. So there's situations where some of these are imported illegally in. Some of them are stolen from within. In a couple of years ago, while I was in private practice, we had a situation where a construction company in Akwa Ibom State had a German engineer on site. And the guy used to be very unruly, particularly with Nigeria. We used to treat everybody like as an idiot. And then one day, one young Nigerian confronted him. And the guy pulled out, went to his car, and brought out an army gun with the army number written on the boot of it. A gun of Nigerian army. And threatened the young man. Everybody ran away, but eventually they reported to the police. The police arrested him and charged him to court. He was charged to a magistrate court in New York and eventually granted bail. Somebody, of course, I think from the company also took him on bail. And the guy ran away from the country. But the army gun was recovered from him. He was in the magistrate court in New York. If people go there now, you see that record. The gun of the Nigerian army was in the hand of a German construction worker. However he got it, nobody would have known. But these things exist, and it is important that every security agency begin to do self-introspection, begin to check his ranks, begin to check his rank and files, and check both the senior and the junior, and give a backup intelligence. Because at the end of the day, intelligence is very critical in what we are doing. Intelligence for the outsiders and intelligence for self-evaluation. Otherwise, if we want to jump every time we want to defend ourselves, want to defend the institution, so that we will not say that we have bad eggs in our system, we will not be doing Nigeria any good at all. That's my assessment of it. Because these things are real. Like the case I just referred to, it's a real fact. The other case I'm talking about, that a policeman was involved in going to dispose of the body of a person who was killed. The trial is ongoing in a High Court. I was still doing the matter till I left office in January.
It's so worrisome when you hear...
Very disturbing.
When you hear this sort of stories. But, you know, as a former Attorney General as well, and someone who's been involved in some of these things and, you know, haven't heard all manner of gruesome cases, when you see children being kidnapped in schools across the country, if some of them may have been able to successfully recover, others were still struggling, especially those tender children who were taken in Niger State. You have to ask, you know, huge and deep questions as to what exactly is happening to our security agencies. Having worked very closely with them, do you think that they really lack the capacity to be able to get these children back? Or are we just foot dragging unnecessarily for whatever reason?
I have my worries about the level of sincerity and commitment. But then the other side of it is that how much security, how much reward, how much effort do we make to encourage those who have victims of those situations so that others who are still working will be encouraged to put their life on the line. The society must pay for what it expects from security agents. I had a situation where in April, within Akwa Ibom State and the borderlines of Akwa Ibom and Abia, we had several attacks on police formations. Some policemen lost their lives. In my divisional police headquarters, my local government, was attacked twice within 3 weeks. My DPO was almost killed. When you now look at what is the quantum of ammunition and arms located at a particular police division as an headquarters, given what the criminals are coming with. These criminals invaded the place. They could have killed my DPO. Just the guy was brave. Because these criminals that came with guns that have the belts, you know, when they put it on rapid, the policeman with his just AK-47 put it on rapid, he can't stand it for long. How long can he wait? So if you put policemen at the divisional police headquarters and maybe they have maybe 10 or 15 AK-47 and bandits of up to like 30 or 40 arrive the place, That's where we have problem. And so, even after facing face to face, they now say, okay, they have carried these children and entered the bush. How do you start entering the bush to go and look for them? What is the level of arms that you carry? Like all these ones you are seeing in the northeast and northwest. The nature of guns you see, the nature of arms carried by these bandits is far above the ones that the police are carrying. So it's like you give me a catapult to go and find somebody who is holding a gun. So you give somebody 1 or 2 magazines to load, and he's going to confront somebody who has a long belt of uncountable bullets. It's not the same thing.
Now, some people will say David won Goliath with gun on his side. But let us hope that will be the case of our security agencies.
Honestly.
We have to thank you so much for coming on this morning and having this conversation with us. Mr. Owemwoko is a senior advocate of Nigeria and a former Attorney General in Akwa Ibom State. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's hope that we will be able to get some mails before we eventually go. Gentlemen, do we have some?
Okay, well, we're hoping to as well. Okay, well, we'll come back to that and take a look at some of them in a moment. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at some feedback coming through from you. Well, Emmanuel says on the suspension of Twitter, commentators on the suspension of Twitter are looking at only one side of the story. The other side of the story is that big tech companies are setting their own rules and enforcing them across the world, irrespective of national laws, regulations, and national security interests. This definitely cannot persist. Governments across the world have woken up to the challenge of big tech companies and are poised to bring them under control. The fight has just begun.
Well, Dari, still on the same issue, says Mr. Enya Kinshallah has really said and explained the whole issue both to the government and the masses. It is left for the government to do the needful, and I hope and pray that government do the needful, because it's like the government doesn't understand the dynamic of the citizen. So the question will be, what is the needful for you?
I was going to ask you, define needful. Demola Lalade says on the same issue, to be honest, the continuous suspension of Twitter in Nigeria will create more problems in the country. Many people depend on this social media platform to make a living. The federal government should, as a matter of urgency, engage with Twitter and come to an agreement that will benefit the entire people of Nigeria.
Mohammed has this one talking about suspension of Twitter. It says, to be honest, I'm just tired of talking about this Twitter ban. It's just clear that those in power don't understand how technology works. That is why deploying technology to every aspect of our lives, mostly security, seems to be a problem. And this last one is from Louis Afolabi. He's talking about addressing national security issues. He says, permit me to ask, does it take rocket science or ocean or finance to acquire those high-tech equipment needed to track or fight criminals and bandits in particular, as mentioned by Mr. Abu Adams? Our leadership should rise up and confront contemporary challenges with modern approach. Times have changed drastically, and our leaders can't be operating with archaic methods. That's from Louis Afolabi. Maybe the answer lies in what Musa Mohammed was saying, but we have to thank you for always sending in your comments and your mails. We do not take them for granted, and we'll always take as many as we can take. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Well, the conversation continues, I guess.
Where?
Took it right out of your mouth.
You know why? Because I used to say on social media. So now they're not sure if they should say on Twitter.
Oh, just where? Okay.
Well, the minister has warned, if you're using VPN, be careful.
Well, you know, I think I heard the Minister of State for Labour saying that, well, maybe he meant the ISPs, maybe not Nigerians using Twitter, maybe the ISPs that have not barred access to Twitter. So it goes back to what we started from, definitions, communication. Let's understand what you mean.
Let's solve the problem of communication. We've solved at least 60% of the problems that we have.
is an
problem
age-long
of communication.
question, right from the time of man.
Let's understand, communication is not just information. Communication is a cycle, and it never ends. Amaya Makinde, have a wonderful day.
I'm Chamberlain, so we'll see you tomorrow.